This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
This episode is supported by Merrill. With a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalized plan for your financial goals. And when plans change, Merrill's with you every step of the way. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer. Registered investment advisor. Member SIPC.
This episode is brought to you by AWS. Amazon Q Business is the generative AI assistant that can securely understand your business data, summarize results, and streamline tasks. Learn what Amazon Q Business can do for you at aws.com/learn more.
The Athletic.
Attack, attack, attack. Evan wins coming from the back. Power spikes Rowland's reward as Nissan is nearly there. Defensive champ Wehrlein is on a roll, but not in a good way. And rookie Barnard sets designs on an improbable podium. All that and more coming on the Race Formula E podcast, Sao Paulo Season 11 edition. Hello, I'm your host Andrew Vanderberg, and joining me fresh back from a belly full of caipirinhas and some beautiful... What's that barbecue stuff they have over there, where you get to flip the card over? Anyway, and some fantastic food. Is Formula E's intrepid Formula E explorer Sam Smith. How was Sao Paulo?
Fogo de Chao is what you're looking for. Yeah. That's not my Brazilian pseudonym. That is the meat, the less vegetarian friendly option in Brazil. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, fantastic start to the season. Lots going on as we saw on the track and off it as usual. So a really, really strong start to the season. And the cars look visibly quicker. I mean, they really do look quite impressive now. 3 seconds faster than their predecessors. So, lots of positive things to speak about.
Yeah, well, let's crack on with that bit. Attack mode now actually works. And we've got this fabulous, at least until people work it out, I'm not entirely sure how they will, strategic game at play, where when you put the attack mode on, you are literally driving by, and it's a whole different type of overtaking. It's not overtaking into braking zones, it's overtaking on traction out of corners. I mean, effectively undefendable or indefensible, whichever way you want to play it. It really worked, didn't it?
Yes, it did, and it was needed, frankly, wasn't it? For attack mode has been neutered, to say the least, over the last 2 seasons. Very difficult to get the traction down and apply that extra 50 kilowatts of power. But they did that, and actually there was a lot of people surprised by it. I wasn't personally. I knew, speaking to most of the teams, that it was going to be very potent going into the race, and so it proved. I think the initial indication was Nick Cassidy, wasn't it, when he was one of the first to go into attack mode and went from the lower reaches of the top 10 straight to the front. And the track did actually promote it. The track is pretty easy on overtaking. There's good braking areas and there's good traction areas out of particularly the chicane that we saw. So it all suited it. I think the real test will come in Mexico, because as we've seen in Mexico in the previous few seasons, it's been very difficult to overtake, and the attack mode is located at a sort of different position in the Foro Sol, and that's going to be interesting to see them blasting down the straight. I expect it to be there'll be lots of overtaking everywhere this season.
Oh, down that main straight, they're going to be 3 or 4 abreast when they're in different power modes.
Yeah, and it'll be good going into that first corner, won't it? So I think similar fashion to Sao Paulo, it'll be a really good sort of cadence of overtaking in the race, not the madhouse Portland stuff that we've seen in Misano in the past. I thought the sort of general package of the race and the way that they were overtaking was great, and as I said, the fact that they've got all-wheel drive now in that 350 mode really helped. But of course, so too the tyres are much racier, so the combination of that has given us attack mode back, which is great, and I think will promote a lot of great overtaking this season.
There were concerns, fears? I'm not sure how strongly we want to go about tyre wear following pre-season. That didn't seem to be much of an issue here, but is that because of the track surfacing we had? Is this something that may well become a factor in Mexico on a more traditional racing circuit surface?
Difficult to say. I mean, it was still part of the challenge for the drivers. I spoke to several after the race, and they did have to treat their tyres, and they did have to look after them in the latter stages. It is big part of the package now. They're very peaky. We saw in qualifying, didn't we, that there were very few that actually mustered a quick time on their second flying lap. I think Max Gunter was one of the only ones who was able to do it in the group session there. Interesting in the race, there were several drivers at the end stating that they fancied a crack at something, or particularly Taylor Barnard, but the tyres in conjunction with the thermal management of the battery, which was still significant. It wasn't quite as hot as it was in March, but it was quite sultry as well, and that dynamic sort of temperature management that was needed on the batteries and the car itself was a factor. So even though Barnard had a lot of percentage up, he was unable to use it effectively because he was looking after various elements of the car. So it's an interesting dynamic, actually. I think there's a bit of misinterpretation in the racing that, you know, if you're up on energy, then you should be winning the race. But I think particularly with the McLarens, especially Barnard, it was difficult because of the tyre management. You just don't get the grip that you need, especially in that extra 50 kilowatts of power you get in attack mode.
Let's talk a bit about the race in detail, in particular the winner, from a real low in qualifying to improbable win. I mean, this is one of Mitch Evans's. I mean, he's had some great wins, one of the best, and certainly one of Jaguar's great recoveries, because, you know, we'd speculated after testing that maybe they were in a bit of trouble, and so it sort of appeared. I mean, maybe not in actual outright pace trouble, but in sort of reliability troubles. Yet somehow, there they are, racking up the first win of the season.
Yeah, Mitch especially had a few crippling problems actually in free practice, stopped and then stopped again in qualifying, and it appeared that he had a software related problem with the brakes on his car, which jammed on and kept sort of resetting, and he wasn't able to get back to the pits at the end. Meant he started from the very back of the grid, and then had this sensational start, didn't he? He took 10 cars in the opening couple.
It was beautiful just watching him gliding around the outside of people.
And he did it efficiently as well. You know, he was able to do it very clinically, very efficiently, and got some good track position. I think it shows you now that actually with the composition of the package, that qualifying isn't vastly important now. Track dependent, I think, you know, obviously like Monaco and London it will be, but certainly most other tracks it's not going to be a vital part of the thinking, apart from the 3 points if you can get pole. Evans drove superbly, did a great job. It's the first time ever anyone, unsurprisingly, has won a race from the back of the grid, and the previous lowliest grid position was Lucas Di Grassi at the 2017 Mexico City E-Prix when he started 15th. So to go from 22nd to win the thing is the stuff of dreams, isn't it? I mean, exceptional performance by Evans, but it was a very calculated one, and yeah, one of his best drives for sure. Even though overtaking is, you know, put it in inverted commas, easy now. It never is in racing, but in context of other championships, it is relatively straightforward with the extra power. You still have to strategize it, and you still have to really work at getting track position early doors, and I think Evans is one of the few drivers who's able to do that in a very clean and sort of methodical manner. So fantastic performance for him, and a big fillip for Jaguar after an extraordinarily difficult start to this season.
Well, as we saw, you know, especially with the pace differential now, it's not necessarily that you're just driving by these people, and keeping out of the wall or keeping away from contact is the skill within itself, right? So for him to have made up all those places effectively, cleanly, amazing.
It was, yeah, and you saw plenty of contact in the early stages. The front wing does seem more robust. I mean, Sebastian Buemi wouldn't agree with that because he got his knocked off in the first lap. Jake Hughes and Nico Mulligot were shunted into the wall with sort of knock-on consequences of the Buemi contact with, I think, a McLaren. Lucas Di Grassi pinged his front wing early doors, but it doesn't seem to have the same fractious element when there is contact. So I think that's good for the racing, but you do get more tactical contact, and you get drivers a little bit more confident to go wheel to wheel and nose to gearbox, or whatever you want to call it. So it's not an easy thing to do, and I think Evans, when you look at his onboard, the way that he positioned his car and the way that he used his momentum in some of those corners was real sort of craftsman-like performance from Mitch on that Saturday.
So is this crisis averted now for Jaguar? Are they back on it, or is this not necessarily an indicative result of where they actually are?
Yeah, I don't think they were ever in crisis. I don't think they were where they wanted to be going into Sao Paulo. There were some issues, and they needed to be addressed. They got through it, and they won the race. That's far from a crisis, that you've got a car and a package able to do it. And a lot of people saying, Mitch was lucky, there was elements of luck in it. There were, but at the same time, this wasn't a lucky victory. This was a victory on merit. He did the hard yards and he did the overtaking and got into position. I thought the interesting part of it for me was when Evans caught Cassidy and effectively overcut him. And that was something that didn't go down well in the Cassidy household. I was listening to his radio, actually, and he was a bit unimpressed by that. And then, obviously, there's not a consequence, but at the same time, he got sort of shuffled down a little bit, didn't he, and got that contact through, initially, Gunter. And then, obviously, as we saw, his steering broke and then tipped Wehrlein onto his head. So Cassidy was... he wasn't in a good place at the end of that race. He was struggling to understand how it all panned out like that, when he himself had done a lot of hard work, as Mitch did, in that period before it all sort of kicked off. And I think Cassidy was in a good position. I think Jags were looking reasonably comfortable for a potential 1-2, and then it all turned on its head, literally, for Wehrlein, as we saw.
Seems like a good time to hear from Jaguar Racing team principal James Barclay.
I know Nick was disappointed, and it kind of feels like a bit like last season, perhaps, in a sense that there's a orchestration thing going there. You've got to digest it still, but can you understand Nick's frustration, perhaps, that he sort of came out second best at that stage?
Yeah, listen, it's never going to be something which a driver who's leading the race doesn't finish, right? And that's the reality. So we'll always look back at the race and say, could we have done something better for both of them? Of course, Sam, I'd be lying to say if we didn't say we need to sit down as a team and look at that. But again, the fact we had both cars in a chance of being on the podium, we won with one of them as a team result is great. Are the things that we can orchestrate and do better, we'll always take that away and have a look at that. It's really difficult, though, when we're also learning about attack mode, right? The first time, this level of attack mode, yes. But as always, we'll take the positives, but we'll also, most importantly, take the things we can do better.
Yeah.
Now, as brilliant as Evans's drive was, it probably wouldn't have been possible without those pair of red flags. So let's just analyse what happened there. The first one, when Jake Dennis's car stopped. And I remember back in the day when I was there, every race we would have a red car incident built into the timetable, where the local track workers and whatever would go through the procedure when this happens. But to my mind, I think this is the first time it's ever actually happened in a race. Is that right?
I don't remember one in a race. No, certainly one hasn't stopped a race, and it's a slam dunk. I think that a few people were a bit surprised there was a red flag, but it is a literal,
it's absolutely
immediate red flag, and has to be for the welfare of the driver to get him out of the car.
So just explain what it means.
Well, it's essentially an isolation issue in the car, in that there is the potential for a car to be live, to be charged effectively. So there is a real danger and threat of a substantial shock, and you don't want to get shocked by one of those things if it is live.
Well, it's potentially lethal. If a track worker goes up and tries to push the car away and the car is live, it is, and that's why they wear the big rubber gloves and have a detailed procedure to make sure the car
becomes green again, so it isn't live. But it's just an isolation fault within the car, likely on this occasion, although not absolutely sure yet because it's been investigated to have been a powertrain issue. It can be a range of things, usually centred around the MGU of the car, the rear MGU, and there was some telltale smoke coming out the back of the car, so it was a significant failure. I mean, the question in my mind, and this is just a question, there is no link at all to the attack charge pit boosting, but this is a really rare event to see a failure, particularly from a Porsche, and that will be investigated significantly. There was a similar issue with Sete Camara's car in Mexico City last year, just before on the formation lap, and his car had to be completely isolated. It was put elsewhere on the circuit because of the fear of a thermal runaway, which is when the cells
and that is
get
the process, right? If there's a thermal runaway, you just leave it to let it burn itself out.
That's right. Yeah, I don't believe that Dennis's car went through that same procedure. I think it went green again, and then it was brought back to close to the paddock where a Sete Cameras was taken, good sort of 400 or 500 meters away from the circuit, to have a controlled sort of detune of it, and to make sure that it was it wasn't dangerous. But the key thing is that obviously the driver gets out. So you'll see the driver get out and literally jump from the cockpit and not touch the car. So Dennis got out and jumped clear of the car. Obviously then the specialist electrical safety team then analysed the car and made it safe to tow it away. So it was quite a lengthy stoppage. I think it was sort of 25-minute, nearly 30-minute stoppage in all. And that has to be dealt with. But it is a very rare event. So it'd be interesting to see what the investigation states on Dennis's car. Big shame for Jake Dennis because he was competitive.
Yes.
The weekend, qualified third, just missed out on pole, didn't he? Or getting into the duel,
qualifying was brilliant, wasn't it? How close it all was.
1,000th of a second, yeah. But Jake was on it. I think the bigger picture for he and Andretti is they've got a really competitive package now, and they look as strong as they did when they had that title campaign back in 23. So initial disappointment, but I think they're going to feature in the title battle this season.
The second red flag, as you mentioned, was that clash that ultimately ended up with Pascal Wehrlein going sort of side on into the wall / catch fencing. A nasty looking accident, but one which, with modern safety precautions in cars, he was ultimately fine. But yeah, you don't really want to see cars being bounced up and out in that way, do you?
No, you don't. It was a significant accident caused by contact with Nick Cassidy's car. Nick had bent his steering, so he had no way of giving Pascal space. Initially, it looked like he was sort of driving him into the wall, but he was not at fault. The steering was crocked through that contact with Gunter a few yards before. Big shunt straight into the wall. The angle was particularly unpleasant, and I think there are elements of luck, good and bad, in this. Bad, the sense that you have an impact on the halo and the roll hoop structure of the car, but good in the sense that he actually did hit the concrete block as opposed to the debris fence, and it was a very close thing. If you actually look at it as probably 30 to 50 centimetres high, and he would have hit the debris fence. And as we see in IndyCar quite often, when you hit a debris fence and you can maybe snag one of the stanchions, it's particularly unpleasant. So thankfully he didn't do that. And then obviously once the energy dissipates and he slides along the track, as he did for probably about 50 or 60 metres, it looks very spectacular with sparks and all sorts flying, but actually it's a good thing because you're just gently wearing down the halo. The initial impact was the worry, but I went straight onto his radio and heard that he was okay. He checked in with his engineer Fabrice Roussel immediately, and he was fine. But obviously he started to get a bit claustrophobic and was asking to be, quite rightly, to get out of there pretty sharpish.
Dangling upside down for 25 minutes probably isn't very pleasant. All that blood rushing to your head, that's going to start hurting. Yeah,
and he'll be hearing the systems whirring still and strange noises and things, and you never quite know. So it's always best to be on your wheels rather than on your head.
Was it Pascal that had that shunt in the Race of Champions and that three-wheeler thing that ended up on the barrier upside down?
Yeah, he did, didn't he? And he's also, there's one I forgot about in Monaco when he tipped it onto its side at Portier, and was sort of trapped between the Armco. So he's got a bit of experience of this. So, but yeah, still, I mean, yeah, quite unpleasant accident actually. But he was checked out at a local hospital, and I actually saw him. We couldn't get an Uber from the track, so we went to the track bar for a bit of a shot.
Any excuse really.
After that, it's on the expenses, and he walked in and looked absolutely fine. It was just a precautionary check, and he was flying home the next morning, so all was well. But disappointing for him. He got 3 points for pole. Great pole position lap by Wehrlein. He looks quick. He looks more than capable of defending his title and becoming only the second driver to do that. And I think in the race he was in a good position. I mean, he got shuffled back a little bit before his accident, but I think in the circumstances he was set for at least a podium in that race. So big disappointment, but obviously some fortune in the fact that he's able to get home and see his family straight after that shunt.
And so that was the thing, wasn't it? Before we had that second red flag, it looked like a straight fight between Nissan and Porsche for the win. Yeah, okay, Da Costa ended up coming second. But is that a reflection of the outright pace? Are they the two quickest packages out there right now?
It felt like it, yes. I think from what we saw in free practice and qualifying, Nissan have made a huge step. We knew they had, but they were fragile. There were issues, not particularly for Rowland, but for the other three Nissan drivers in free practice and qualifying. The McLarens didn't qualify well. They were hampered by some issues, some self-inflicted, some through the Nissan equipment. I think... yeah, I do read it as Nissan versus Porsche on what we've seen so far, with Jags just slightly offset from them. And that really goes to the form that we've seen and felt and heard about the pre-season testing as well. Nissan are very quick. I mean, that car with Rowland particularly, although Nato showed flashes of true pace during the weekend, is going to be a race-winning package this season. And it was just unfortunate for Rowland and the way that it went for him after a few great starts. But ironically, it was that second start that did for him.
Why don't we hear from the man himself about exactly what happened?
A bit cruel, that. You were in a great position, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, felt like I got a few blows, to be honest. Obviously, I was in the perfect position to kind of pull away and almost finish the race with the second attack mode, and then the red flag came, so I lost that advantage of having the 4 minutes I had left. Then, obviously, on the restart, had a good sock, so it was still fine. Got the good start.
But I mean, the attack mode worked perfectly for you. I mean, you were it never was in doubt. You were always on top of it.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, it was good. I mean, I wouldn't say went to plan because they were earlier than I expected, and I didn't really want to do the second one. But at the same time, I didn't want to get swallowed up by everyone. I didn't want to leave myself in a position where there's a safety car and then the Jags had it like they did. But then, in the restart with the legality things, just...
Were you told that the others had got it? Because both McLaren...
I saw Norman come in the drive-thru, and I didn't even think, to be honest. I knew he had a drive-thru, but I didn't think... And honestly, at that point, they should have known.
So it's obviously a common fault throughout the Nissan. Did you get any clarity on what exactly it was? I mean,
not 100%, but it seems like at the speed where it translates from front to rear, there was an issue on legality. But on my first start, because I was at the front and I lifted quite early, I didn't get to the transition speed. So then the second one, when I lifted later and fought Antonio to turn one, I then got the same problem they got. It should have also been spotted, and I would have just lifted before the transition point and been okay.
Your time and expertise are valuable. And with professionals spending nearly half the work week on written communication, focus is one of the most important things to have at work. With Grammarly as your AI writing partner, you can stay focused and get through your work faster with relevant, real-time suggestions wherever you write. As a journalist and podcast host, I'm constantly writing and rewriting copy and drawing up scripts. It's part of the job, and Grammarly helps make it faster. It's got some really cool features like tone suggestions to help you strike the right balance between direct and friendly in work emails. Plus, Grammarly has a ton of other great features like advanced spelling, grammar, punctuation, and conciseness suggestions to ensure your writing is professional, mistake-free, and clear. And best of all, Grammarly works across 500,000 apps and websites, allowing you to work smarter, not longer. For 15 years, Grammarly has helped professionals do more with their writing. So what are you waiting for? Get more done with Grammarly. Download Grammarly for free at grammarly.com/podcast. That's grammarly.com/podcast.
This episode is supported by Merrill. With a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalized plan for your financial goals. And when plans change, Merrill's with you every step of the way. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer. Registered investment advisor. Member SIPC.
We know you have a lot on your holiday to-do list. And at the UPS Store, we're here to help. With our pack and ship guarantee, your gifts will arrive intact or you'll be reimbursed. Got holiday cards to print? We're also the premier printing store. We've got everything you need for every way you holiday. Visit the upsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Most locations are independently owned. Product, services, prices, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Be unstoppable. Come into your local store today.
Another team powertrain that looked competitive was DS Penske, with Jean-Eric Vergne in particular, right in amongst it. Yeah, he was particularly unlucky with that red flag coming when he was in the middle of his attack mode, completely neutering the effect there. Are they there with Jaguar's best of the rest?
Probably, yeah. Probably. I'm not sure they maximised what really had in Sao Paulo. Vergne, I think he made a mistake in qualifying and didn't get through to the dual phase. Just missed out there. Gunter did and was rapid, but then got knocked out in the quarterfinal. I think that they've got a really good package that will get quicker, will get better. I managed to see a little bit of the action on track, and they look really good through the slow stuff over the curbs, riding the curbs well, getting the power down pretty quickly. Vergne was unlucky. He was really patient in the race, actually, just getting into a reasonable position in the lower reaches of the top 10, and then made a little bit of progress. And just as he took his attack mode, his big tranche of attack mode, the red flag came out and scuppered him. So yeah, that's not good. Put him behind the 8 ball, really, not able to get a decent crack at the final part of the race, and fell back to an eventual 10th. Well, finished 10th and got 9th after Nato was penalised. I mean, Nato got penalised for not starting the first restart in the correct position, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
Was pinged 5 seconds for that, yeah, and went straight back to 13th place from 6th, so that was disappointing. But yeah, I think DS Penske looked good. I mean, Gunter, I thought, had a really strong weekend, and yes. Despite getting mixed up in that schmozzle that tipped Wehrlein over, eventually finished 11th, was in amongst it as usual. Was Max, not popular with drivers, particularly Jake Dennis, who felt as though he got chopped a few times by Gunter. But Max is pretty ruthless when he's out there, and is no shrinking violet. And I think actually that's going to be a good foil to Jean-Eric Vergne this season. I think they will win. I think they'll put this fallow, dry period to bed pretty quickly. I'd expect them to win a race in the first half of the season.
We mentioned him at the top of the show, brilliant result for Taylor Barnard, having run at the back for a large portion of the race to come through, and then, as we mentioned, having additional energy, even if he didn't maybe have enough tyre grip to shine through. But a great start for his first full-time campaign. Is this something that's going to be replicated?
I think so, yeah. The Nissan, as I said, the step has been significant. It was a difficult weekend up until the race for Barnard. I mean, he didn't show much pace, and qualifying didn't quite happen for him. He started towards the back of the grid, and he was running last actually in the first few laps. Then got the penalty, the drive-through, came in at the restart. They got not lucky, but I think it's the right thing to do because they come in first into the pits because they're so far back. They've taken their penalties. They obviously then restart where they're not a lap down, and they get a fresh crack at it. And the fact that Neon McLaren adapted to that and left their strategy late in terms of not gambling, but just sort of altering what they probably were going to do in the race. Both Barnard and Bird were attack mode rich at the end of the event and were looking really good. At one point, I was thinking, look, attack mode is so potent now. Barnard and Bird were where they were at the second restart. One of them could win this. I mean, Bird could defend his Sao Paulo title, and Barnard, potentially, who was better on energy, was looking like he could maybe...
I thought he was going to do it.
Yeah, like I said at the top of the show, the issue was that they with the tyre wear, the attack mode wasn't quite as devastating as it had been in the early phase when you've got better tyre wear, when it was worn a little bit, plus the thermals of the battery was hindering the absolute pace of the powertrain a bit too. So, those factors...
It was like fan boost back in the day where you couldn't use it in the last sort of 10 laps of the race because of the state of the battery back then. You're going to have to use the attack mode a bit earlier, aren't you?
Not dissimilar. And it becomes something that you have to manage. And I think that, and don't forget, this is a guy who's starting his 4th ever E-Prix, and he's not going to make a risky manoeuvre on an experienced driver like Da Costa or Evans. He had to be right with them, and he wasn't just quite with them, was he? He was just half as back and not able.
Tantalisingly too far back.
Yeah, but it was good because Bird had his back. He said that on the radio. He said, look, tell Taylor to go for it and I'll cover him off, which was great. Nice bit of intra-team tactics there. But
classic elder statesman role.
Yeah, exactly. That's the nice dynamic that works there with that team at present. And Barnard just wasn't able to make any more progress, but a fine achievement anyway to get third. He's ticking off the milestones, isn't he? Youngest driver to ever start an E-Prix, youngest driver to score points ever, and now the youngest driver to stand on a podium. So we know what's next, Taylor. No pressure. We expect you to win it in Mexico. No, I think just the achievement of doing that will give him a lot more confidence and sort of accelerate his potential. And I just want to remind you, VW, that I tipped him for a victory this season. I don't know if you remember that a couple of weeks ago, but I just thought I'd mention it. Get that in early.
Why don't we hear from Taylor now while I ignore your point there?
Yeah, I mean, what a crazy race. I mean, you were last early doors, then you had the drive-through, and you come through and get a podium. I mean, how do you summarise that? How do you praise it?
I don't think you can. I think the best way to do that is watch the race back, honestly. I still don't know what happened myself. I just remember that when we took the second attack, it made life very easy for me to come back through. So the team did a great job on calling that strategy. Coming back through was... it was a great feeling to pass everyone. Obviously, then there was the scary crash with Pascal, but it's great that he's okay. But to remind us, all of us, that it's dangerous. Obviously, then there was the second red flag, and I was third. That was the moment where I really realised that I could have got the podium, and I was extremely nervous to take the start. Thankfully, it was rolling start. Made my life a little bit easier, but the team did a great job.
It's obviously the Nissan has made a big step. You've made big improvements from the manufacturer side. The team's tight and good operationally. Has it sort of readjusted any objectives for you this season? Are you going to let it go to your head, or are you just sort of practically, methodically working away?
I think I'll just work it through. Coming into the season, I was aiming for points and hoping for a podium or a win, and my first race I'm already on the podium, so I think that's just how unpredictable Formula E is. Obviously Nissan have done a good job on the powertrain, so hopefully that can improve our expectations, but we have to stay grounded, we have to keep working. Our qualifying pace this weekend was not great, so it's obviously at the end a great result, but we still have a lot to work.
You're obviously high on energy at the end compared to others, but were you struggling a bit with the tyres and the thermals?
Yeah, I didn't have the tyres at the end. I also had a bit of overheating, just because the restart was so fast and I was pushing so hard to try to pass, but I think not having the tyres made the temperature problem even worse. So yeah, I tried my best to attack, but Sam was defending for me as well. So I think it was just at that point just to secure the points for the team.
Well done.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, he is a very impressive young man, and I'm sure. What is the who currently has the record for the youngest winner? Putting you on the spot. Here.
I do believe it's Max Gunter is the youngest. He won at Santiago in early 2020, just before the pandemic struck. So I think he was
there. How old was he?
22 years and something days. Don't have that at the top of my head. I'm not a miracle worker, blimey.
So he's got a little bit of time in hand. Then.
Yeah, he has. Yeah, I think Max Gunter is definitely the youngest. So I think Barnard is 20 now, isn't he? So he's got a couple of seasons potentially, or season and a half to try and beat that. And with, as I said, with the
pressure
package that they have with that Nissan, there'll be a lot of confidence flowing through it. And interestingly, Nissan were better overall in terms of getting the best out of that package, as they should be as the manufacturer, and Neon McLaren will only get better because they're now getting more running. Don't forget they get very little.
Yeah, the data will flow down.
Of course, yeah. And there's a good relationship there between Nissan and McLaren. It was probably tested a few times at the weekend with the reliability issues and things going on, but I genuinely think that Ian James and Tommaso Volpe do have a very strong, healthy relationship working together. And McLaren, Barnard and Bird only got a handful. I think they probably got like a day each of private testing, or maybe a little bit more, maybe say 2 days maximum in the off season, and then they just get that time at Harama. So they are on the back foot, and we've seen it as well with Envision now, haven't we? Envision nowhere near really Jaguar at the weekend in terms of outright pace, and a host of issues for them as well, and ditto some of the other customer and manufacturer partnerships too. And Andretti weren't quite with Porsche in aspects of last weekend, but I think further into the season we go, the more that will tighten up.
This episode is supported by Merrill. With a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalized plan for your financial goals. And when plans change, Merrill's with you every step of the way. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer. Registered investment advisor. Member SIPC. This episode is supported by Merrill. With a dedicated Merrill advisor, you get a personalized plan for your financial goals. And when plans change, Merrill's with you every step of the way. Go to ml.com/bullish to learn more. Merrill, a Bank of America company. What would you like the power to do? Investing involves risk. Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith Incorporated, registered broker-dealer. Registered investment advisor. Member SIPC.
One manufacturer did have a solid start, Mahindra. We said that they had made a big step towards the second half of last season, and that sort of carried on with a solid finish from Eduardo Matara in fifth, and then Nick de Vries backing him up in sixth. So a really solid haul of points to get their season going.
Yeah, they had a really strong weekend actually. Not spectacular, but very solid. Great points. I think that's one of their best points hauls in recent seasons, certainly getting a fourth and a fifth. I think it mirrored what they achieved last year in London, didn't it? So a really better way to start the season. They had it tough in the last 2 years with that Mahindra M10, now the M11, and I think this one just seems to be a lot stronger. I think they've worked extremely closely, as we know, with certain suppliers within a sort of pool of key technical suppliers that they work with, and they've really invested in some talent there as well as people like Joseph Holden, who is a technical lead in that team. They've got Jeremy Collinson, who came from Maserati. I was talking to James Rossiter, actually, who worked with Collinson at Maserati for a season, and James really rates him as a technical leader and as somebody who can put a really good package together, and it paid dividends, didn't it? We saw Edo Mortara was consistently top 8, top 6. He was running pretty cleanly. I get the feeling that Edo now is a bit more in check with combat, with fighting drivers, and I think he let a few go in that race, which bore some fruit later on in the race, and whereas 2-3 years ago I think he'd have got involved and got some damage and a puncture or whatever and compromised his race, but this time it felt like he was putting in a proper structure to a longer sort of vision of what he and Mahindra could achieve, and he got that 4th position. De Vries followed up with 6th and got promoted to 5th once Nato was penalised. And yeah, I think they've got a lot to build on there. I think they're going to be a consistent point scorer. They can potentially get a bit more. I know they're targeting podiums this season. The key for me is going to be what happens if, we don't know this yet, what if there is confirmation that they're not going to be a manufacturer for Gen 4, and then where does that leave the morale? Where does that leave the pathway for what Mahindra are going to do in a couple of years' time? And then do people start leaving the team and losing faith and what have you? That will be the real crux of their season, I think, and we probably won't know that until next year, early New Year's, probably sort of end of January. I think a decision's going to become known on that one.
Decent start for Kiro on debut, couple of points with Tictum coming home in 8th. The relationship's only going to get stronger as they get their head around that Porsche powertrain as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, exactly. They're still finding their feet with that. I think Harama was, again, lots of people getting excited, but the reality is that they've got a lot of work to do with that package. Tictum didn't look like a driver fully confident with it yet, and I'm sure he'd admit that himself, and I think in a few races time I think you're going to see some sparks fly once they get the hang of that and understand how to use this year-old Porsche. They're there or thereabouts. They can get points and they can qualify in the duels, I'm sure. Both drivers there. Tictum was the most impressive of the two drivers throughout the weekend, but equally David Beckman's still finding his feet in Formula E and in a racing situation.
He's got a pass for at least the first half a dozen races.
I would say so. I think we saw it. It was the classic cannon fodder rookie sort of wide eyes for Beckman in that race. He got shuffled out of all kinds of things and got made a mistake and tagged the wall and broke his suspension, which did for him in that race. But he was getting it from all sides, and once he builds up his elbows and sharpens his elbows, I think he'll be all right. But pace wise, he was reasonable, not quite with Tictum at the weekend, but enough there for him to be a decent prospect for later on in the season.
So those are the pluses. Obviously, for every plus, there probably has to be a minus. Nico Müller, not the start I think any of us would have imagined he would have had at Andretti. Terrible weekend, and as we've sort of mentioned, inauspicious beginnings to the season for Envision as well. Buemi getting a few points, but the pace really not being there.
Yeah, I think in the case of Nico Müller, it wasn't the ideal start. He made a mistake in free practice, and he damaged the rear of his car, but more significantly did a tyre. He did get dispensation from the FIA to get a spare tyre there, but he lost a bit of track time, never really seemed to or feel to have recovered from that. It just felt like one of those that goes away from you early on, and it's his debut with Andretti, so he's got a few races to gel and bed in. It feels like, just sort of looking at him and speaking to some people in the team and observing things there, that he's still not quite gelled with his engineer and his engineering team there, and he still just needs to sort of calibrate and get into the Andretti way. But he brings so much to the team in other areas, particularly the understanding of the tyres, the Hancocks, which he's quite experienced in from previous programs with DTM particularly. Nico Müller's too good to have too many of those this season, and I think he knows he's got a decent package there, and he'll be back in Mexico, and I expect him to be right with Jake Dennis, which he really wasn't at the weekend. So I think we're going to see a different Nico Müller in the races to come.
Yeah, it's going to take a few of these in a row before this becomes of any concern. Everyone has a bad weekend.
Yeah.
I'm amazed you haven't got it down on the script about Lola's magnificent return to international motorsport. And in actual fact, I think they'll be quite happy with their overall level of performance over the weekend, won't they?
Yeah, it was a nice story, wasn't it? It was great. I made a point of going to see Till Bechtelsheimer and Mark Preston and some of the other members of the gang on the grid and shaking their hands and wishing them luck, because they've done a stellar job to get this back, to get Lola back from a dormant brand and manufacturer. It's a great story, because even 3 years ago, that as somebody who lives, I'm sat here in Huntingdon, which is the home of Lola, traditional home of Lola, and I did do some freelance work for the previous iteration that was handing over to Till. And I can tell you there's nothing. There's nothing. There's an old wind tunnel, a bit of a model making shop, and that's it. There is nothing else. And then they've built this home in Silverstone, and they've invested in some really great staff and got the technical connection with Yamaha, and then the operational agreement and relationship with Apt as well. And it's just built a nice package. It needs a lot of work. To be fair to them, I thought what they delivered in Sao Paulo was quite astonishing. It wasn't headline grabbing or newsworthy.
It was solid.
But for Di Grassi to qualify in the position that he qualified, and I'm just very quickly checking, he's actually 14th. Maloney qualified 19th. There were issues. There were lots of little niggly things that they had to get through, and then for Di Grassi to be running in the cusp of the top 10, for Maloney to get up at one stage to 5th position when he used his attack was
I had to send you a message when that was going on, make sure that you're taking your pills.
it was quite extraordinary, good to see. But they do have a lot of work. They are nearer the rear than the front, and they will be for the first half of the season. But there are flashes of that package where you can see if they get the rub of the green and they get a bit of luck, that they can get points this season. Like I said in the last pod, if they got 30 points this season, it'd be incredible. I'm sure they're targeting much more. But I just think this thing needs time, and I sense that they all know that it needs a good half season at least for them to be properly in the midfield, which is where they'll probably be at stages of this season. But yeah, just a good news story, and the fact that they've gone for this blue and yellow traditional Lola with the huge Lola across it is just great. It's people don't realise that actually the previous incarnation of Lola was very much a customer-focused entity. So although there was 250, 300 people working for the company, and there was programs all over the world, there was never a factory entity. And do you know what? How about this I'm going to borrow Matt and Richard's Anorak Fact department here.
Make it a one-off, otherwise we're going to have to pay a license.
The Anorak Fact, let's call it Cagoule, Formula E Cagoule Fact, is that the last time a Lola Works entry was entered in any international motorsport race was the 1989 Formula 3000 International Trophy at Silverstone. And the drivers, I'm amazed you don't know this, VDB.
Were you washing wheels on this car?
This was just the year before, actually. I wasn't quite in the game at this stage, which is probably why they finished the race. Mauro Martini and Enrico Battaglia in a one-off
how could I forget?
Lola factory. Yeah, there you go. If anyone's interested in the start positions or how they got on in the race, message me directly. Yeah. Subscribers only.
Yeah, exactly. We'll do a one-off subscriber special on that. I think we're down to the any other business bits.
We didn't mention Envision, did we? I forgot about Envision.
Well, we covered them off, really, I think.
Not much to say. Frines didn't start the race. Buemi got his wing knocked off and came back for some points. Yeah, tough one for them. Some circumstances beyond their control, I think, but still, they're a team that is going to start feeling pressure to get some big points very soon.
Okay. Any other business? You put up some story about this. I guess I probably ought to have read it. What's this thing they're planning in Miami?
Thanks for the big build-up for the story, VDB.
I'm really trying to get my enthusiasm going here.
Look,
but the listeners will understand why when you go into the details.
Let's try with this one. So there's obviously a big calendar gap between the Jeddah race in February and then the Homestead race in mid-April. 8 weeks, a chasm in terms of a calendar and a schedule. So Formula E have decided that they will fill this gap with an event, a marketing stroke media event, I guess you'd call it, which we believe, although it's not, none of this is confirmed yet, this is just from my own paddock sweep intelligence, is that they will use the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, home of the Miami Dolphins. NFL team? I know nothing about NFL. Presume it's an NFL team. One of those. So, yeah, big venue. They're going to do, as far as I know, a sort of Race of Champions style time trial event, which will be... it's a conceptual stage, so the presumption is that the race drivers will set a time, and that a selection of media influencers will be then put in the car and see how far they can get, or there'll be some kind of sporting format where they'll make a show. It's believed to be over a couple of days in early March. I think March 4th to 6th is an initial target, and this is something which has posed a lot of questions to teams and manufacturers, in the sense of what cars are going to be used, first of all, which is quite crucial, and also who is paying for any damage, stroke, powertrain issues, and how does it work into the sporting format, and how does it actually work into the cost cap, which is much more of a crucial message for the teams. That's all apparently being sorted out as we speak. It's, I think, about 10 weeks away that this is going to take place, so time is of the essence. But yeah, potentially exciting, but it's, at the end of the day, it's not a race, is it? Which is what they should be doing in that space.
Yeah. Well, if people want to watch it, they'll watch it. If they don't, they won't. What else is happening?
Sergio Sette Camara was back in the paddock. Sao Paulo was announced as Nissan's reserve. Makes a whole lot of sense for everybody, that. I think it's good for Nissan, experienced, quick driver, and also a driver who probably will race at Berlin, because Natto is compromised by the WEC clash at Interlagos. So we expect to see Sergio Sette Camara in that seat alongside Oliver Rowland at Tempelhof.
Right, well, I think, what is it now? 4 weeks till the next one. Enjoy a lovely Christmas, everyone. Put your feet up, spend some time with your family, enjoy yourself, and we'll be back in the new year. Thank you, and goodbye.
The Athletic.